Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto fights back against the council harem naruhina. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by AreYouFrikkenSerious and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. The day it all began, Aka the prologue. Naruto swore to himself as he all but stormed down the road towards his home, fist clenched too hard that his fingernails had torn the skin, the blood dripping from his knuckles with each step. His world had just been turned upside down, in the worst way possible. Flashback. Naruto followed the Anbu cat into the council chambers. "Thank you, cat. That will be all," Homura said from his position next to the empty Hokage chair. "Where is Tsunade-bachan?" Naruto asked, eyebrow raised. "Or anyone from the Shinobi Council for that matter." "Silence," one of the civilians shouted. "No, you be silent," Tsunade growled, smashing open the council doors. "I want to know why neither I nor the Shinobi Council has been summoned to this." Behind her the Shinobi Council filed in, glaring at the elders. "You would have been biased towards the demon," the unfortunate civilian council member was immediately detained by Tsunade's Anbu. "Tsunade, restrain yourself," Koharu called, only for Tsunade to snarl at her. "You shut the fuck up. All of you." At that, the elders and the civilian council snapped their mouths shut. "Now, before the debriefing begins, let me make myself clear. I am Hokage. Not you. If you don't like this, consider vacating your council seat for someone with an actual brain." The civilians clicked their tongues but remained quiet. "Now, Genin Uzumaki, please inform us on everything that has happened during your battle with Uchiha Sasuke at the Valley of the End, as well as your perspective on the events leading up to your battle," Tsunade said. Naruto nodded and began to recount the events from his perspective from the moment he and the Sasuke retrieval squad left the gates, the encounters with the Sound 4, him catching up to Sasuke at the Valley of the End. He paused, gathering his thoughts and memories. Then he began talking about his fight with Sasuke, mentioning clearly that he was not trying to kill Sasuke. He ended with how he managed to overpower Sasuke, rendering him unconscious, and how he was busy carrying him back when Kakashi found them. At that point, he lost consciousness. Unseen by everyone, Danzo was activating his stolen Sharingan and subtly began influencing the civilians, his fellow elders and a few of the shinobi, altering what they heard ever so slightly that even if Inoichi should mind delve them, he wouldn't find anything out of place. "So, in other words, you caused undue injury to Uchiha-sama?" Haruno Mibuyuki asked. "Surely you should have been able to bring Uchiha-sama back without having to rely on Theon your tenant." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "When did I ever say that I used its chakra?" he asked. "Oh please, you don't stand a chance against Uchiha-sama otherwise," and probably forced him to use the power of the cursed seal. Another civilian council member said. "No." Naruto began, but was interrupted by another civilian council member. "How can we trust your words if you willingly bow to using its power?" Naruto was normally pretty calm, but these false accusations was going on his nerves. He was interrupted again. "I wouldn't be surprised if it has been controlling this time," Tsunade interrupted the civilian council. "You be quiet. Naruto, please continue what you were about to say," Tsunade said, sending the civilian council a withering glare, daring them to say something. "Thanks, Bachan," Naruto said. "I did not use the Kyuubi's power until after Sasuke began using the power of the cursed seal." "Lies. You are doubtlessly under its control." The comment by Homura caused Naruto to snap. He punched him in the face. None of the active shinobi in the room could blame Naruto, however, they knew that Naruto had fallen for their trap. Danzo, the other elders and the civilians smirked in victory. "Anbu, take Uzumaki Naruto to prison on accounts of assaulting an elder," Danzo said. "Belay that," Tsunade ordered instantly. "Naruto, restrain yourself." "Fine." Naruto growled, arms returning to his side, though his hands were still curled into fists. "Okage-sama, by law, Genin Uzumaki has to go to prison for assaulting Elder Homura," Koharu said smoothly. If that old fossil had actually tried, he could have dodged Naruto's punch without much effort. Tsunade scoffed. "Besides, it was you who was goading him into it." "Regardless, the fact of the matter is that he still assaulted Elder Homura," Danzo said. "However, if the council is so inclined, I may have another possible solution to this problem." Tsunade sighed, her concentration slipping just enough for Danzo to gain a precarious hold over her, a hold he wouldn't keep for long. "Naruto, would you leave us for the time being?" she asked. 1. Naruto nodded and left the room, sending a glare at the elders and civilian council members. 13 minutes later. Naruto clenches his jaw when he heard what had just been decided. Genin Uzumaki, registration number 012607. You have been found guilty of 1 count of aggravated assault on a fellow shinobi of the Leaf, assault on an elder, and endangering the lives of your team on your last mission through your actions. You are hereby banished from Konoha. You shall be given 24 hours to pack your things and leave Konoha grounds," Kaharu said. Naruto's eyes widened in shock before he stormed out of the room. Flashback end. Slamming his door behind him, Naruto leaned his back against it as he let the tears flow. He cried because he felt betrayed. He cried because he would no longer fulfill his dream of becoming Hokage. He cried because he wouldn't keep his promise to his friends who believed that he would make it to Hokage. After what seemed like an eternity, though in reality was only around 20 minutes, he stopped crying, though he did not move from his position at the foot of the door. Eventually, he dozed off. Meanwhile, in the Hokage office. "Get the fuck out of my sight, you pathetic pieces of shit." Tsunade roared at the civilians who thought to push their paperwork on Tsunade. "And take your fucking paperwork with you and do it yourself." Followed by a string of curses and threats should she find any of their paperwork on her desk again. It was this that Hyuga Hiashi encountered upon arriving at the Hokage office. "Hokage-sama." He greeted her, earning a sharp "what now?" from Tsunade, though she calmed down when she recognized him. "Hiashi, what can I do for you?" she asked. "I need your help with something," he said, taking a seat in front of her. His face turned grim. "I do not believe that I have much time." Later, that evening. Naruto woke up when he heard and felt someone knocking on his door. Wiping his eyes with his sleeve, he turned to the door when, this time, he heard the knocking. "What do you want?" Naruto asked, opening the door. There stood the Anbu from earlier, Kat. "Uzumaki-san, Hokage-sama asked me to discreetly bring you to her office," she said, barely managing to keep her voice straight. She just felt bad for the kid, seeing him this down. "What does she want now?" he asked, shaking his head as he felt her hand on his shoulder. Arriving at Tsunade's office, he was met with the smell he had come to associate with the 5th Hokage. "Sake. You asked for me, Hokage-sama?" Naruto asked. He saw Tsunade flinch at his dead tone. "Yes, there is something that I need to give and tell you before you go," she said, standing up and walking over to the wall where Naruto knew she kept her stash of liquor. He may or may not have at one point swapped a random bottle out with one filled with oyster sauce. Some weeks ago the look on her face was worth having the entirety of the Anbu force on his tail. To Naruto's surprise, she put her entire arm into the hidden compartment and he heard the distinct puff of a storage seal being opened. Tsunade turned around, holding a large shoebox-sized box in her hand. "In here you will find a letter from your parents and no, I can't tell you who they are because I have made a promise to Sensei only to speak about them to you when you turn 16, in 3 years' time," she said. "I can however say this. They would be proud of you." Naruto numbly took the box, his frame beginning to shake. "If it were up to the council, then you wouldn't ever get this bit, fuck them," Tsunade said before walking back to her desk and picking up a seemingly random scroll from the pile. "Here, take this as well." She handed him the scroll before leaning in. "You are not alone, Naruto. I will do what I can, but I fear that the elders will go behind my back to do some things. But remember. I will always have you in my heart." "Thanks, Aba-chan," Naruto said as tears began to fall. Tsunade hugged him, then told Kat to bring him home so he can pack. After the two left, Tsunade summoned 2 more Anbu. "Tori, Seru. I have a mission for you," she said. Next morning. Naruto, with the help of Kat, Tori and Seru, managed to slip out of Konoha shortly after dusk, leaving a clone behind on their behest to draw off any pursuit. Now though he was alone, his escort having left to return to Konoha about an hour ago. The scroll Tsunade gave him told him to head over to a small village near the Land of Fire's capital. It said that there would be others who chose to join him. Judging by the speed at which he was traveling, Naruto estimated that he'd be there by dusk the next morning. 2. Suddenly, he received a rush of memories that made him stumble and plant his face in the dirt. "Oh what the hell?" he said, wondering why he had memories of him being in Konoha after he left. "How could I have been in Konoha when all I left there was a shadow clone?" Naruto blinked a few times, a sense of enlightenment rushing over him. Suddenly he understood why he had memories, vague as they might be, of him beating up numerous people on missions when he was with his team most of the time. No way shadow clones send back their memories when they dispel. Naruto yelled out in surprise before cringing when he looked back into the memories of his clone. "Ouch, what the hell? Sakura, would you have to punch me there?" Naruto grabbed his still healing injury on his chest. Time skip. Naruto arrived at the outskirts of the village just as the sun was reaching the horizon. The inn he checked in was cheap but at least gave a homely feeling, unlike some of the other inns he had stayed in, some of which felt outright sickening. The room had a bed, a small table and chair, a toilet and a small wardrobe. To most, it would seem bleak, but to Naruto, it was more than enough. After a simple dinner of rice, fish and vegetable soup, Naruto listened to the stories of the villagers as they spent the evening resting after a day's work. At night, Naruto fell asleep wondering what the future had in store for him. A week later. Naruto was busy repairing the roof of the inn to earn his stay and wait for these others that Tsunade spoke about. It was midday and he was sweating profusely after having replaced 50 tiles in the last 3 hours. It being summer did not help at all. "Menma, lunch is ready." The proprietor of the inn called up. "Humming?" Naruto called back. When he had checking a week ago, he had purposefully used an alias in order to draw off any attention. That and he had started wearing a mask like Kakashi does all the time to hide his most distinguishing feature. His whiskers. Thus far, only the proprietor, her husband and their 2 daughters had seen his face, and to his fake horror, the girls found out that he purrs when you stroke his whiskers. As he climbed down the ladder, he heard a snobby voice speak up behind him. "It isn't up to my family's standards, but for a countryside dweller like you I guess it is good enough." Naruto turned and sent a glare at the speaker, a young girl with dark brown hair and pale eyes, and a facial expression that strongly reminded him of Neji before he beat him during the Chunin exams. "The Hyuga? What is she doing here?" Naruto thought. "I doubt you will find much better in a village such as this one, shrimp," Naruto said. "Most of your clan would head on straight to the capital since it is so close." "How dare you? I am nobility and you are a mere commoner," she seethed. "And I could care why exactly?" Naruto asked. "It actually gives me more of a reason to hate you." The girl was taken aback. "Hate me?" she asked. "Yes. You are standing between me and my hard-earned lunch," Naruto said, crossing his arms but inwardly smiling at the expression the girl had on her face. Suddenly the girl became meek and mumbled an apology. If she had blushed, Naruto would have thought that she was related to Hinata. Walking into the inn, Naruto immediately walked into someone, sending the 2 of them to the floor. "Oni-sama." The girl from before shouted. "Watch where you are going, you stupid." "Oh, shut up will you, brat." Naruto ground out, rubbing his head which hit the head of the other person. "I'm sorry for walking into." "Naruto-kun." Naruto blinked and looked at the person. "Hinata?" he asked. "What are you doing here?" Tsunade-sama hasn't told you?" she stammered. "I'm coming with you." Naruto blinked. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then. 7 years later, Western Empire, AN. Really need a name for this place. Suggestions. Naruto growled as he sat at the table, a literal mountain of paperwork next to him, waiting to be worked through. Damn that Kurikuma making me the heir to the Chronicled have warned me about the paperwork before Dingui did I accept again these words, and many more were flowing from his mouth. His and the 5 other clones sitting at nearly identically packed desks around the room. Should not have beat up those thugs back then when has my luck run out meanwhile, his secretary stood outside the room, sweat dropping and wondering if she should tell them that they were well ahead of schedule. Meanwhile, the real Naruto was in his private dining room, waiting for Hinata to bring out whatever wonder of the world she had cooked up for breakfast. "I am the luckiest man alive. I have a goddess as a wife and she is absolutely the best at cooking," he said out loud, knowing full well that Hinata could hear him and what kind of effect it would have on her. "What, so you married me because I just make good food?" Hinata countered, though she smiled. It was their usual morning banter and no hostile intentions were present at all. Pretty soon, Hinata came out of the kitchen carrying a tray of mouth-watering food such as pancakes, cinnamon rolls, fried rice amongst others. This was basically their early morning routine now. Naruto would wake up early, manage to make half a dozen shadow clones to begin working before Hinata grabs him and pulls him back to bed. An hour later he would wake up again to the smell of Hinata's cooking. They would then eat breakfast before heading over to the training field for an hour or 2 for their daily training. The day however would be different as one of the 2 people whom Naruto, Hinata and their 3rd companion encountered and subsequently joined their group knocked on the door. "Naruto. Hinata. There are a few people from Konoha here to see you," Karen said. Naruto groaned but stood up and headed to his wardrobe to get dressed. "And hurry up about it, you fool. Better be quiet or I'll disable your vocal cords again, Taiya-san." Their last companion, Nietzsche said. "Is it safe to come in, Hinata-sama, Naruto-sama?" "Yeah, come on in," Naruto called. As the 3 entered, they stopped and laughed, seeing Naruto and Hinata struggling to tie their belts in a neat fashion. No doubt the maids would raise a fuss about it before long. "You have been the royal family for just under a year now and you still can't tie a fucking sash." Taiya cackled, making Karen slap her across the head for insulting her cousin. "Taiya, you have been with us since we saved you from that pile of trees. When will you learn to watch your language?" Karen admonished her friend. "Bite me. I am from fucking Iowa, remember? Our habits are harder to kill than seasoned Iowa jonin." Taiya spat. "And Neji, you have been with us since the beginning. When are you going to stop being so damn formal? Naruto added his own 2 cents. As soon as you two finally make me an uncle, Naruto-sama, Hinata-sama. Neji smirked, seeing their faces turn red. Later that day. Naruto and Hinata entered the council chamber, seeing that everyone was already in attendance or at least walking towards their designated seats. Unlike the council in Konoha which had equal numbers civilian and military membership, his council had a civilian to military to ally ratio of 1:1. 2 representatives for each. Civilian affairs, ground forces, naval forces and allies of the empire. And each member has been hand-chosen from a list of nominations given by their respective faction. And each one with his or her own quirk. Iroh, the head of General Civilian Affairs, was a master firebender and was using his extensive firepower to gently cook some tea, which he handed out to everyone in Atendanseven. Those who were for all intents and purposes alcoholics couldn't say no to his tea. Izumi Kutris, the chairperson of the Merchants Association and the Alchemists Association, was someone Naruto both feared and respected. After all, it is not every day that a woman claiming to be a housewife can demolish an entire unit of soldiers as warm-up, keep everything running smoothly in 2 associations, and lastly train a group of alchemists like it was nothing. And she has a brutal fighting style, something Naruto found out when he once inadvertently pissed her off. Edward Whitebeard Newgate was an old man who tried to have Naruto join his family, but Naruto turned him down, saying that, quote, I am not of Sea Dog stock. Despite this, Naruto and Whitebeard have a uncle-nephew relationship instead of a father-son relationship. On the other hand, Shanks' red-haired Uzumaki was an actual family member of Naruto's. He was a captain in the Uzumaki merchant fleet before the Uzumaki clan was all but destroyed in the east, though he managed to save about 100 of the original 1,000. He eventually turned to piracy in order to provide for his clansmen until they found a home with one of the more peaceful warlords. When Shanks and Naruto first met each other, it was during Naruto's engagement party where Shanks heard another Uzumaki was in town but ended up getting wasted when Naruto drank him under the table. Makarov Dreher was the oldest human present by several years. He is the current chairperson of the Association of Mage Guilds, a position he had received so many times in a row, now that he had jokingly and famously stated out loud. I will never let go of this position, even if I am dead. Despite being one of the 2 people representing the army, he was actually someone who outright did his best to avoid conflict until someone messed with his brats. Even Whitebeard felt pity on the poor sod who last did that. He and Whitebeard have a comical rivalry going on, that being who is prouder of their kids' brats. Legenda was a prominent member in a rebellion against a tyrannical warlord who held one of the larger territories. She later became the leader of said territory until she resigned after finding the paperwork to be too tedious. It was also around this time that Naruto arrived and began negotiations for her territory to join the growing empire. On to the 2 members who represented the demi-human and non-human races, not actually part of the empire, but hold a strong friendship with those living in it. The first representative was Rimuru Tempest. At first, Naruto and Rimuru hated each other's guts, and the 2 of them would often get into verbal conflicts about various things, whilst Hinata was happily sipping tea and conversing with the members of Rimuru's own council. Even now, the 2 still argued about random things and would go all tsundier when asked if they were friends. The second representative is an elf prince named Legolas. His father is one of the 3 elf lords that rule over the elven people. He used to be the elven ambassador in the dwarven kingdoms, who still hold a stance of neutrality in everything, before being assigned the position he currently holds. Now then. Naruto began. Shall we begin the meeting? Chapter 2 of Times Past, Part 1. The doors opened and the guards announced the entrance of the 2 shinobi from Konoha, oddly though, adding an X before the Konoha. Naruto clenched his fist before easing the muscles, glad that the sleeve of his kimono was covering his hands, whilst the silly mask he was wearing covered his face, despite itching like a colony of head lice. He couldn't curse the one who came up with this idea because it was his idea in the first place. He sent a small glare at Hinata, which she ignored when he sensed her using the principles of the Juken-Juho style to massage the itching areas on her face under the mask. Ex-Konoha soldiers, Tsunade Senju and Jiraiya Thesnalanin. The announcer asked the white-haired person, who snapped a quick sannin at him. Tsunade choked on her tongue and barely prevented herself from smashing the guard in the face. That. The announcer said nonchalantly. Tsunade, having been taught royal decorum from a young age, was aghast at the informality of the guard. Blondie, leave it. By royal decree, the citizens of the empire are to be less formal when in the presence of the royal family. Whitebeard told her. Tsunade got a small tick mark upon being called Blondie. Miss Senju, please, speak. Naruto said, knowing that he had to act else she blew a gasket. Tsunade breathed in and out a few times to calm her nerves. Your Imperial Majesty, the 2 of us have come from the east in search of my last living relative and Jiraiya's godson. She answered. And what's the name of the person you seek? Hinata asked. His name is Uzumaki Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki if we use the naming sense of the Western lands. Tsunade answered. Naruto and Hinata looked at each other and a silent conversation went between them. What will you do when you find him? Hinata asked. We will ask him to come back and help us save Konoha from the tyrant who holds my people in an iron grip. Tsunade answered, with Jiraiya nodding in agreement. The same with the two people who left with him. What if they don't want to return to the east? Hinata asked. We'll find a way to convince him. Jiraiya answered. The council looked at them for a moment. It was Rimuru who broke the silence with a chuckle, which was infectious. Soon, the entire council body as well as the royal pair was laughing. Tsunade and Jiraiya looked around, wondering what was so funny. I'm sorry, but what you want to do is nigh impossible. Legolas answered their unasked question. And why is that? Jiraiya asked. Tsunade slapped him over the head with a hiss. Be more formal. Because I doubt the populace would appreciate it if I were to leave or involve them in yet another war. Naruto said, removing his mask. Hinata did the same. Naruto, you are the emperor. Tsunade was shocked beyond belief. Not my first choice is careers, but I didn't really have much of a choice. Naruto smiled. But my predecessor made it his last wish that I take over the reins of the empire when he passed away just under a year ago. Your predecessor? Tsunade asked. Yes. The first emperor and the one who held the vision of the unification of the western lands. Naruto began, nostalgia in his voice. Black Bear Kurikuma Aizen. The first emperor of the Yggdrasil Empire and a dear friend of mine. Naruto smiled, remembering the time when he first met Kurikuma. Flashback, 6 years ago. Naruto, Hinata, Neji, Karen and Taiya arrived in the port town, Konoha, after a 3-week-long boat journey. Finally, we are off the fucking ship and back on bloody dry land. Taiya swore, wheeling her wheelchair down the pier towards the customs office at incredible speed. Taiya-san, language. Neji called. Bite me. She snapped back. She is right though. 3 weeks of nothing but waves and seasickness, I am glad to have good old earth under my feet again. Naruto said. Hinata giggled and Karen chuckled. Let's go and see if we can find a room or two. Karen said. Later, that evening. The group of 5 gathered around the table and were discussing their next step. The place seems quite run down. I'd like to remain here and help repair some of the buildings. Naruto stated. Whilst I am not overly fond of being around people, I agree with Shithead. Taiya agreed. I'd suggest moving more inland, away from here. This would be the first place for any hunters to look for us. Karen gave her vote. That would be my suggestion as well. Neji agreed. All eyes turned to Hinata, who blushed from the sudden attention, thought for a moment. I'll say that we stay here for a few days. We do not know this land nor its people. Thus it would be dangerous for us to travel anywhere else without knowing what the current situation is around us. She finally said. The others nodded, some in resignation, others not. She had a valid point. Without proper knowledge about the people they were amongst, they could not truly hope to fit in. This means that we will have to find a short-term job. Neji said. Taiya, you always wanted to play your flute in front of an audience. Karen said, with Taiya opening her mouth to swear, retort or something along those lines, then closed it, remembering having spoken to Karen about that sometime in the past. That is actually a good idea. Naruto said. The others nodded. When not using her flute to cast her genjutsu, Taiya was actually an accomplished musician. Then what will the rest of us do? Hinata asked. I could help out at the local clinic. Karen suggested. I'll go and look for work as a builder. Naruto said. I'll go with him. Neji said. Hinata, how about you work as a waitress for the landlord downstairs? Naruto suggested. Hinata thought about it, then nodded. As long as the clients don't get to handsy, I can do that. Oh, you poor girl. You have no idea how drunk clients act, Taiya and Karen thought. A few days later. It didn't take long for news to spread amongst the population of Konoha of their arrival. Naruto and Neji quickly gained a reputation of being hard-working and trustworthy workers who did everything properly, despite a lack of experience, and were often sent all over the town to help the work crews that were desperately short on manpower. Taiya spent the sum total of 3 hours on the street corner before the local theater owner invited her to perform on stage. Taiya would later admit to having used a small genjutsu to help accelerate her climb of the social ladder. Karen was the least known person amongst the group since she worked as the doctor's assistant, though she admitted that she still had a lot to learn in terms of combating sicknesses and diseases, using the local medicines which were already in short supply due to the ongoing warfare. Then there was Hinata. Where to even begin? News of her working in the inn spread faster than wildfire and the inn's popularity boomed overnight. Her calm and shy demeanor attracted the hearts and minds of most of her sober clients, and those few drunks who tried to either force themselves on her or just to molest her quickly found themselves on the end of a vicious beating of the still sober members of Hinata's new fan club. Once, when Naruto came home from work, they nearly beat him up as well when he gave Hinata a small peck on the cheek. The only reason they didn't was because Hinata spread chaos and carnage to those who landed a hit on Naruto. And the local lord, who witnessed the display, offered her a job as an attendant for his family, which she respectfully declined. Currently, Naruto and Neji were working on replacing the rope of the dock's crane when the alarm horn sounded. In the ensuing chaos, Naruto climbed to the highest point he could see, in this case the small lighthouse right next to the docks, and looked around to see what was going on. "Neji, the town is under attack," he shouted down. "Approximately west-southwest. Another army is also approaching from the north, different color." Neji nodded and left to warn the others. Naruto nodded and leapt from his vantage point to a balcony 20-odd feet below him, and from there to the ground another 30 feet below that. After that, he sprinted for Kodshire's walls to see if he could help. Once there, he barely managed to say that he was there to help before a spear and a crude helmet were pushed into his hands, and he was told to man the ramparts. "What is going on?" he asked around. "Dunno." The militiaman next to him groused out, a sailor, Naruto reckoned, by the hoarse sound of his voice. "Warlord Akamaru has violated the neutrality of our territory, and Warlord Kurikuma has come to support us," a guard captain shouted, addressing everyone on the walls. "Kurikuma's troops will keep Akamaru occupied long enough for the civilians to evacuate to the nearby fort where they will be safe." "What will be our duty, sir?" a man near Naruto asked. "We will hold these walls against any sneaky attack sent by Warlord Akamaru, at any costs," the commander shouted. Time skip. Over the next 2 days the battle between Kurikuma and Akamaru raged, and during each engagement, Kurikuma's lines were pushed back. "Hey Neji?" Naruto asked. "Yes," Neji answered. "What are the odds, in your opinion, that the inhabitants of this town will not survive this battle?" Naruto asked. "Almost guaranteed at this rate," Neji sighed. "You are not planning to do that, are you?" "I will if I have to," Naruto said. "You there, desertion is an offense, punishable by death." A nearby officer shouted, having overheard Neji and Naruto talking. "Prick." Naruto cursed when the man was out of hearing range. What would he know? Later that day. "Hold fast." The cry came just as Warlord Akamaru's soldiers brought up scaling ladders, having broken through Kurikuma's flank and opened a route to the town. The defenders were forced to take cover because of the arrows and stones being lobbed at them by the soldiers below, though Naruto and Neji just caught and threw the projectile back where they came from. When the first soldiers landed on the ramparts, it became clear that the ill-equipped town militia would not be able to match the battle-hardened soldiers opposing them. Except for 2 of them, that is. Neji engaged the first soldiers with some effort on his part due to their armor and shields. Naruto did what he did best. With Kurikuma. "The hell is that?" one of the generals under Kurikuma's command asked as a huge smoke cloud appeared on the walls of the town they were fighting for. "Better yet, what is that?" Kurikuma asked, seeing a mass of figures suddenly throw the soldiers at the foot of the walls back, effectively reforming his broken flank, whilst at it for simply continuing their assault on Akamaru's forces. "Back with Naruto and co." "Well, there he goes," Neji commented. "Hinata will not be happy about this. What is going on? How is this possible?" These questions and more were being asked by the surviving townsfolk as Naruto's army of clones fought a hard battle against the enemy soldiers. "Who the hell are you people?" one of the officers asked Neji. He recognized him as the one who threatened Naruto earlier that day. "Just some people trying to get away from constant war and wishing to live peaceful lives somewhere," Neji answered. "Then how do you explain that?" the man asked, pointing out the carnage below them. "That is Naruto saving your lives, so stop asking questions and shut up unless you have something sensible to say," Neji answered. The man and those around him immediately shut up, having seen him fight, they knew that he outclassed them more so than Akamaru's soldiers did. Down below, Naruto grunted as he dodged a club aimed for his head, only to have the man's shield slam into his face, sending him sprawling. A nearby clone of his grabbed the man's club before it could be brought down on Naruto's head. The quick jab to the throat made the man drop the club and grab his injured throat. The clone was not able to follow up on the jab as he was stabbed by a spear. The man wielding it got his hand slashed by Naruto, who then turned and kicked the downed man whose throat his clone hit in the head, rendering him unconscious. Hearing steps behind him, Naruto rolled out of the way, though he still received a small cut down his left arm. Another clone came in and stabbed a kunai under the swordsman's arm, where the armor was non-existent. Naruto was given a breather, which he used to look around. All around him, his clones and enemy soldiers were locked in a vicious melee, with his clone slowly gaining ground. The whistling sound snapped him out of it and he saw the incoming arrows too late. Fortunately, he was only hit in the thigh muscle and his forearm. Making note of the arrowheads around him, Naruto realized that none of the arrows were barbed, so he grabbed the arrows in him and pulled them out, holding back curses as he did so. Ignoring the pain in his arm and leg, Naruto crossed his fingers again to reinforce his one-man army, and the battle raged on until the sun began to sink below the horizon. Naruto was later found by Neji, badly injured but alive and asking for a bowl of ramen. Yup, he'll be alright. The next day. Morning broke upon the land around Konoha, and as the high of battle finally wore off, soldiers and civilians alike swallowed the bile, threatening to erupt from their stomachs upon seeing the scores upon scores of corpses littering the battlefield. Almost immediately the cleanup began as every able-bodied man was drafted into either digging mass graves or hauling the dead onto carriages to be brought to said mass graves. Kurokuma meanwhile was in a discussion with a local mayor about the sudden appearance of the reinforcements, but he had no answers. Meanwhile, in a makeshift hospital in Konoha, Naruto was being bandaged up, having suffered numerous wounds during his brash assault on the enemy soldiers, with Neji having convinced Tsunade to wait until the nurse was done bandaging Naruto before beginning her lecture. "10 bucks she will rant for 10 bloody minutes," Taiya said. 20 that the rant will go on for longer than 30. Neji countered, shaking her hand on that. Tsunade wasn't done until she literally dropped asleep on top of Naruto 4 hours later, and Taiya invented new swear words as she handed Neji a handful of cash. Time skip, next morning. Kurokuma walked into the room, seeing the two dark-haired members first cause their hair ends to stand out in a white room after all, then the red-haired female in the wheelchair next to them. He then saw the blonde-haired male on the bed next to the dark-haired female. Instantly, his instincts told him that this is who he was looking for. "Before we begin, allow me to firstly thank you for saving this town." He greeted them with a bow. "My name is Aizen Kurokuma Blackbear, warlord of these lands." Flashback end. Naruto smiled at the memory of his first meeting with Kurokuma. "Yggdrasil? What is that?" Jiraiya asked. In all of his life, he had never heard of such a word before. Tsunade was just as baffled. "It is the name of a large tree from Kurokuma's ancestral home," Naruto answered. "I also asked him about it when he told me about his ambitions after training and rising through the ranks, that is." Flashback, 5 years ago. "So, Blackbear," Naruto began, referring to Kurokuma by his real name, not the title nickname. "I know that you have a dream to unite the Western lands, but what would you even call it? Much has changed in the year following the Battle of Konoha." Naruto and his group were accepted into Kurokuma's army, with Taiya receiving the best medical attention that was available, and after a series of operations, she regained most of the functions in her legs, though it wouldn't be until 2 years later that she fully recovered. Naruto and Neji were taken under the wing of Kurokuma's generals, who trained them, taught them the art of war, as well as leadership skills that worked for both the military as well as civilian affairs. Naruto excelled at these, surprisingly, whilst Neji surpassed him in pure combat potential. Naruto made up for this by trouncing him in each and every game of chess and Nefertiti, a game originating in Kurokuma's ancestral home. 1. Hinata was taken under the arm of Kurokuma's sister, who refined Hinata's court etiquette and such skills, though she had to refuse proposals on an almost daily basis from those noble families serving under Kurokuma's banner. Eventually even Naruto had enough and publicly proposed to her, which she happily accepted. Less than 10 minutes later, Neji took him aside and, because Hiashi requested he do this to anyone Hinata accepts, gave him the usual list of threats should Naruto break Hinata's heart, much to the mirth of Karen and Taiya, whilst Hinata just awkwardly chuckled when Neji gave an additional list of threats, not as a proxy, but as a cousin. Karen meanwhile continued to hone her medical skills and was taught a defensive martial art style, effectively becoming a combat medic doctor. Due to the ongoing wars, she quickly gained vast amounts of experience with wounds, broken bones and PTSD counseling, the last one being especially hard for her since she herself had a very light case of PTSD since she watched her mother's murder, for lack of a better term, due to Kusa putting too much strain on her family's healing bloodline. "I shall call it the Yggdrasil Empire," Kurokuma answered, taking a swig from his mead. "Yggdrasil? What is that?" Naruto and Hinata asked. "It is a tale passed down by my family since before our people were forced out of our ancestral home, far to the north, a land where water turns to stone all year round," Kurokuma answered, looking somber. "There, legends told of a tree so big that from roots to crown, it connected 9 worlds to each other, including this one, called the Yggdrasil, the World Tree." He turned to look at Naruto, Hinata, Taiya, Neji and the others in the room, some of whom were former enemies, others recent allies, but all at a point where they can call each other friend. "My dream is for the Yggdrasil Empire to serve a similar purpose, to connect all the people in the Western lands, no matter who they are or what race and or culture, they will find a home within the empire," Kurokuma said proudly. So you wish to instill a sense of unity within the name itself, hoping that it will inspire the people to fight for a united cause instead of following individual warlords? Neji asked. Indeed, my friend. Kurokuma answered with a smile. Naruto chuckled before lifting his cup and toasted the name, which everyone in the room answered with cheers. Chapter 3 of Times Past, Part 2. The evening, Imperial Palace. Jiraiya and Tsunade were tired of a day filled with surprises, destroyed plans and more surprises. The latest of these was when they joined Naruto, Hinata and the 4 others in their small family, Neji, Taiya, Karen and Naruka, a redeemed female who bore a striking resemblance to Naruto, so close that they could nearly be identical twins, minus the whisker marks, red hair, and the fact they were different genders. The last one was a real shocker to the 2 Sannin, who had not expected that. The only thing that delayed their questions at this point was when Hinata came in with their supper that she had conjured up, the heavenly smell alone making their stomachs rumble. As soon as the food had been eaten, the questions began, starting with why former members of Atogakure were with Naruto, Jiraiya, and how Naruka came to be Tsunade. Naruto sighed at the torrent of questions before smiling, remembering how he met the non-Konoha members of his small family. Flashback 1, Taiya, 2 weeks after Naruto's banishment. Naruto was still reeling from the news that Hinata had given him a week ago. When they had reunited, Hinata had come clean with everything, her feelings, her first meeting with Naruto that he had forgotten due to a beating that he had received later that day by the drunk family members of the bullies that Naruto had scared away. Hinata only knew about this because she and Hiashi had gone to look for Naruto to thank him for protecting her from bullies. And came across the beating in progress. She continued with the time she followed him, looking at him from the shadows, finding encouragement in her own goals from his determination and steadfast will to never give up, and lastly the feelings she felt when he cheered her on during her match with Neji during the Chunin exams. Granted, it took her a few days due to her fainting habit. But she got it all out. Naruto, overwhelmed by all that was said to him, didn't know how to answer. Neji chose to join Naruto because, quote, "You have changed my life around for the better, given me a new lease on life. That is not something I can just let go without repaying you. My conscience won't allow it." He had since then become the self-proclaimed guardian of Naruto and Hinata in name only. Naruto and Hinata considered him a true companion. Hanabi wanted to go with her sister, especially since the 2 of them had reconciled ever since the Chunin exams, specifically, after Neji's match with Naruto, Hiashi came clean to her after his visit to Neji, which caused her to run up to Hinata. Gave her the biggest hug she could give with her small arms and cried out years of frustration and self-pity that she had bottled up inside her because it was the Hyuga way at the first opportunity given following the invasion and subsequent funeral of the 3rd Hokage. But Hiashi forbade her, stating that he had made his peace that he would lose one of his children. He refused to lose another. In the end, with promises from Hinata that she would write to her whenever possible, Hanabi relented. Now, they were traveling towards Nami no Kuni, where Naruto wanted to visit some old friends of his, a certain bridge builder and his family. Mantamari certainly did a number on this forest. Naruto commented as they made their way through the destroyed forest. She'd make a fortune being a lumberjack. I wouldn't know. I was fighting somewhere else. Neji stated before stopping and looking around, Byakugan activated. What a show, is she still alive? He asked, anger seeping into his voice. What? Who? Hinata and Naruto asked. The girl who was with the team who took Sasuke. Neji answered. She is alive and trapped underneath some tree. Where are you going? He called out as Naruto headed off in the direction he was pointing in. To save her. Naruto called back. Hinata was close on his heels and Neji grudgingly followed. They found the girl, who seemed to be sleeping, and even Naruto could tell that something was really off with this picture. The girl was sleeping, whilst both her legs were completely crushed under a pile of logs. Page Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto called, summoning forth a score of clones who began to systematically dismantle the log pile without moving any of the lower logs, as though it were a game of pick-up sticks, an extreme version of pick-up sticks. As soon as the last log was lifted of the girl, they all winced looking at the state of the legs. The bones were definitely shattered, and it looked as though she had tried to escape before, only for the situation to become worse. As they saw the blood flow freely through the limbs again, they heard the girl moan in pain, before hearing her murmur, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," over and over again until they brought her a nearby stream where they decided to make camp until the girl woke up. Whilst Neji and a pair of Naruto's clones pitched the tents, the real Naruto was off gathering firewood and some edible plants, whilst Hinata was preparing a salve that she hoped was strong enough to numb the pain the girl would undoubtedly feel when she woke up. It wasn't until the next day that the girl woke up. And much to Neji's dismay began cursing the high heavens from the pain, though that was strongly dulled after Hinata applied her salve to her legs. Thanks, she groaned as the smell of cooking fish and stick bread reached her nose. Fuck, I am hungry. Not surprising, considering you were underneath those logs for around 2 weeks. Naruto said, handing her grilled fish and a stick bread. How did you survive this long anyway? She cocked an eyebrow. The hell you saying? Her eyes widened when she recognized him. You? Yeah, me. Naruto said. And no, we are no longer enemies. Give me one fucking reason to believe a single bloody word. You number CHOMP number. She was silenced when he shoved the freshly baked stick bread into her mouth and she automatically started chewing on it. For one, you are not in Konoha right now. She turned to see the guy who had engaged the leader of her old team. We are no longer with Konoha anyway, we are probably not allowed to go there anymore anyway. Please calm down. We just got you out from that pile of trees yesterday. Hinata told her, her voice seemingly calming her down. Fine, the girl growled before devouring the rest of the bread and the fish, holding out her hand for more. And I survived because I had my doki bring me whatever water and food they could find. Name's Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto greeted her as he handed her a pair of fish and stick bread. Her eyes widened a bit but she first chowed the food he had given her. Aren't Uzumaki supposed to have bloody red hair? She asked. Got my hair from my dad. Naruto said. Hinata and Neji raised an eyebrow. Naruto had not told them anything about his parentage, despite admitting he knew who they were a few days ago. The girl just shrugged. Name's Taiya. More grub. Now. Naruto rolled his eyes but gave her more of the fish. My name is Hinata. Taiya turned to look at the girl who was currently busy bandaging her legs. This is my cousin, Neji. She saw the older male give her a nod in greeting. Where will you be taking me? She asked. First we will be heading to Nami no Kuni. Naruto said. There we can see if there is anything that can be done for your legs. And your tongue, Neji murmured, but everyone still heard him. Bite me, okay. I grew up in Iowa. Our habits are harder to fucking kill than seasoned Iowa jonin. She snapped back. Are all citizens of Iowa that foul-mouthed? Naruto asked. No shit, shithead. Taiya snapped at him, grabbing the fish he was about to eat from his hand and devouring that as well, before patting her stomach, satiated. You can thank that fucking hellhole called a Togakur for that. But the Orochimaru leading them, I don't doubt it. Naruto commented, a bit miffed that his fish got stolen. Taiya just nodded before taking a good look at the 3 former Konoha shinobi. Overall, she didn't get the vibe that they would betray her to bounty hunters from them, however due to old allegiances, she was being careful not to reveal too much information. The blonde boy, Naruto, was just as short as she remembered him to be and apparently just as brash as when she met him. The hair color however was slowing hurting her eyes whenever the sun shone on it, so she turned her attention to the next person, Neji. From him, she got some awkward vibes. He seemed stoic, but having lived in a Togakur where most of the residents hide their faces most of the time, she simply read his body language. She could tell that he was strangely calm and composed, unlike his other male companion, who just left to catch more fish. Lastly, she turned her attention to the girl and immediately her eyes began twitching. What the fuck did you eat to get such a bod? She asked, making Neji spit out the tea he was just drinking, Naruto to stumble into the stream and Hinata to squeak and blush, twiddling her fingers. Hinata couldn't answer immediately. Just ordinary food. Bullshit. Taiya said, eyebrow twitching. How much milk did you drink? Hinata refused to answer. She was embarrassed enough as it was. A few days later. They camped out near the stream until Taiya became well enough to travel for long distances and when the time came to decide on who would carry her, Neji made the fatal decision to challenge Naruto to a bet. The stakes. The loser had to carry Taiya until they reached Nami. The bet was simple, who could find more of the herbs Hinata needs for her ointment salve, with Hinata being the judge. He should have chosen something else. Naruto has shadow clones, enough said. As it was, they were just leaving the forest, Hinata and Naruto walking ahead and chatting with each other, while Neji, with Taiya on his back, walked a bit behind them, both feeling like third wheels in this crew. Hey, can you slow down a bit? Taiya said. The atmosphere over there is way too bright. She pointed to the younger teens ahead of them. Neji just nodded and slowed down his pace for a bit. Later. Why? Taiya asked them as they made camp that day. Everyone looked at her. Why go out of your way to save me? She clarified. Why help me when I was your enemy less than a month ago? Because for one, we are no longer enemies and second, I don't think you are that bad of a person. Naruto said as he was busy striking his flint and steel, trying to get the kindling to light. Taiya looked at him as though he were crazy. Look, I took a gamble when I chose to rescue you back there. And thus far you have not shown any reason for us to regret it. Naruto told her in one of his rare moments of wisdom, with Hinata and Neji both nodding in agreement. When it came to an unbiased judging of people, Naruto was better than them. Taiya looked at them, then turned away, refusing to let them see the tears forming in her eyes. The others didn't say anything. They already knew. A week later, Nami no Kuni. Okay, I know I helped protect this bridge, but I don't remember it being this huge. Naruto said as they crossed the bridge. A light fog had descended and although they could see a fair distance, they couldn't see the end of the bridge. Neji felt his eyebrow twitch, Hinata was giggling at Naruto's antics, and Taiya was caught halfway between gawking at the size of the bridge and laughing at Niji's reaction. Things have changed in this last week, more so than she would admit. She had begun opening up to the group, finding Niji's steadfastness and Hinata's gentleness a good anchor point for Naruto's excessive charisma, unpredictable hyperactiveness and blunt never-give-up mentality, which was slowly breaking down her walls. She shook her head, wondering if she should actually try and open up to them. Time skip. Their warm welcome into Nami was a surprise to everyone in the group and the local doctors and healers, at Naruto's request, took a look at Taiya's legs. All of them stated that there was very little if nothing they could do for her. Over the next few weeks, during which Naruto and Neji helped with the ongoing rebuilding of the islands, Taiya came to a decision. Later that day she opened up to Naruto, Hinata and Neji. She had intended to only talk about her past before Orochimaru saved her, but once she broke the dam, the water just kept flowing. She laid everything out to them, with Hinata often letting her cry into her shoulder. As the tears eventually turned to drowsiness, Taiya just asked them not to leave her, as had done so many in her life before drifting off to sleep, still clinging to Hinata's jacket. Flashback 1 end. Jiraiya looked deadpan at Taiya, who smirked at him. Not once had he expected this from the former Iwa citizen turned Odo Kunoichi. We didn't need to talk about it. It was a unanimous decision by the three of us. Naruto said. Doc, remind me again not to ever go and make a bet against you. His godfather said. What about Uzumaki Karen? How did you find your cousin? Naruto smirked before telling him how that happened. Flashback 2, Karen, 2 months after Naruto's banishment. Naruto and the others arrived at a small village near Tanigakure in Kawa, no Kuni. It was here that Taiya looked around and recognized some of the landmarks. Hey, shitheads and squeaky. She called out to Naruto, Neji and Hinata, who all grumbled at the nicknames. I think we are near one of Orochimaru's old hideouts. Say what? Naruto asked. Not an important one, mind you, Taiya continued, ignoring Naruto. A minor one that was more designed to be a bloody fob for raids and such shit. We may get some extra gear for Blondie and shithead here. Are you sure, Taiya? Hinata asked. Taiya nodded. I was first stationed here after passing PFT. PFT? Naruto asked. Hedamaru's fucking training. Taiya said bluntly. Even then he had a fucking rep. I don't want to know, Neji answered. What I am saying is that not everyone is with Orochimaru by their free will. Taiya said. Also, I may be able to find someone there who can give us intel on what the hell is going on in the main villages. The three former Konoha shinobi looked at each other and nodded. They did need some information on current affairs after all. Alright. What can you tell us about the base? Neji asked. Later. We are being followed. Hinata said quietly. Naruto, what done Naruto? The others looked around only to see Naruto missing. Will Blondie be alright? Taiya asked. He is capable of outrunning our Anbu. He'll be fine. Neji answered, deadpan expression on his face. Meanwhile, with Naruto. Doc, where the hell am I? Naruto asked himself. Yes, he was lost. Whilst the others were walking towards the local tavern, he somehow ended up in the local red light district. Hey there, kid. Are you lost? He turned to see a woman carrying a bag of groceries. Gee, what gave it away, lady? Naruto deadpanned. He got a suspicious vibe from her, something he hadn't felt in a while. He barely managed to keep his eyebrows from rising when he realized that this woman had a train chakra network inside her and was currently walking under a henge. The lady giggled before pointing at his traveling gear. Most people who come to this humble town with traveling gear usually head straight to the tavern at the center of town next to the main hall. Naruto cocked his head to the side. And where is that exactly? She pointed to the left. Walk down that road, take a right when you reach the water fountain, 2 blocks later, take a left. The tavern will be the third building on the left. Many thanks, lady. Naruto said as he ran down the road. Quickly stopping next to an alleyway and adjusting his backpack, he continued on. Nobody realized that in that moment, he had created a dozen shadow clones inside that alleyway. A few minutes later. And Taiya was laughing her ass off seeing Hinata venting her worry at Naruto's disappearance and subsequent reappearance just under a second ago. Even Neji, though outwardly not showing it, was chuckling on the inside, seeing the sight. Naruto meanwhile was completely lost. He had absolutely zero experience with situations like these, and it irked him somewhat. Hey, can we get a room and plan our next step of our journey? Naruto asked. And Hinata were keen to drawing a crowd here. Sure. So 3 rooms right? Taiya asked, smirking. One for me, one for shithead, and one for the two of you, since it sounds like you two need one. Naruto, thanks to his month of training under Jiraiya, immediately knew what she was implying. Hinata meanwhile took a moment to comprehend what Taiya was saying, then joined Naruto in inventing new shades of red faces. Meanwhile, across the road. There is no way in hell that those guys are shinobi. One of the people following the group said into a microphone. Two of them are reinventing the concept of blushing for log's sake. Don't let your guard down. He heard the response in his earpiece. Agent 3 apparently met one of them and sensed chakra from the blonde one. Also, the two with dark hair fit the description of the Hyuga clan in Konoha, only missing their trademark eyes. They could be using contact lenses to change that though. Copy that. Will continue my observation duty. The first one drawled out before returning to observing the group, which had devolved into a shouting match between a still blushing brunette and the redeed, whilst a blonde had calmed down and was sipping some tea and eating what appeared to be popcorn alongside the tall brunette male. Want some popcorn? Yeah, sure. The spy answered, grabbing the bag that was handed to him. He ate a few, then stopped. His head snapped to the side just in time for him to eat a meal of knuckle sandwiches. 1 minute later. Naruto's clone looked down at his handiwork, wiping the dust of his shoulder. Not even worth the effort. At his feet, bound up in a way that makes it impossible for even Green Jonin to escape was an Odo shinobi. In the clone's hand was a smashed radio set and a cyanide pill tooth that he had knocked out during the knuckle sandwich feast he had served. Now then, better let the boss know. The clone said, chucking a pebble at the window. Everyone in the room looked at him, with him waving and giving a thumbs up, then dispelling. What followed was pandemonium, as masked shinobi assaulted random people in the town, all bearing the symbol of a Togakure on their forehead protectors. This of course alerted the nearby garrison of Tanigakure shinobi who came to investigate. And in the ensuing confusion, Naruto's clones grabbed the remaining real Togakure shinobi, bound them up, then brought them to the rendezvous point outside of town, specifically, on the opposite side of where Taiya said the outpost was. There, Taiya played music for the fools on a new flute that Neji had bought her back in Nami, placing the Odo shinobi in a torture genjutsu until they broke and spilled everything. The names of those still in the base, how many team are spread out in the immediate area, what defenses were in place, layout of the base, the whole lot. At the mention of one of the names, Taiya flinched. Let's go. Naruto said and then began marching off until Hinata ran over and steered him in the correct direction. Oops. He said, rubbing his head, embarrassed. Hinata just giggled and kissed his cheek before realizing what she just did and fainting. Pay up, I win. Taiya said, holding out a hand. Neji grumbled as he handed her a 50 note. Next morning. One couldn't really call the attack on the outpost an assault thanks to the intel taken from the captured Odo shinobi, who were currently being handed over to the team from Tani by some disguised clones. Naruto, Hinata and Neji snuck in without raising the alarm, with Naruto dismantling the traps without effort, whilst muttering low-level crap and third-rate trappers under his breath. The 2 times they were discovered, Neji took them out before they could sound the alarm, with Hinata helping Naruto in tying them up. In total, there were only 2 teams of Odo shinobi in the outpost, including the one shinobi who Taiya asked for them to spare, a girl with red eyes and red hair a few shades lighter than Taiya's. Who are you? She hissed, holding a kunai out defensively. Karen? Hinata asked her, making her eyes widen and nod. Taiya asked us to not hurt you. Karen gasped, lowering the kunai. Taiya-chan is alive. Alive and waiting for us at our rendezvous point in town. He said. She looked at him and tried to smell his chakra. And immediately fell onto her ass. His reserves were ridiculous, almost as large as Lord Orochimaru's. How can I be sure that you know her? She asked. Or that I can trust any of you? For one, she swears a lot. Neji, Hinata and Naruto deadpanned in unison. Also, she told us about your surname Uzumaki Karen. Naruto said in a low voice. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, son of the late clan heiress, Uzumaki Kushina, and the 4th Hokage, Namikaze Minato. Karen's eyes widened as far as they could go. She wanted to call him out on his BS, but his face held no hints of lies, nor did his chakra fluctuate, an indication of a lie, or at least half-lie. Let's go. By dawn, a team from Tani will be on the way. Naruto offered her his hand. Unless you want to stay here, she immediately grabbed his hand. I will come with you, if only to talk with Taiya-chan again. She said. Naruto nodded. Let me first introduce you to the others. He indicated Neji. This is Neji Hyuga. Don't let his stoic glare affect you. He's a big softy on the inside. He said. Karen suppressed a laugh at the glare that Neji sent him, one which he ignored. And this is his cousin, Hinata Hyuga. She is quite the cuddle bug. Only as much as you are a teddy bear, Naruto-kun. Hinata said with a small blush, telling Karen all she needed to know about those two's relationship. Something brewing, but not quite there yet. Nothing a little prank or two couldn't fix. Before we leave, where is the armory? Neji asked. It's this way, though we don't really use it as one since Lord Orochimaru has turned most of it into a library of stolen scrolls, which he was unable to open or read. I see, let's see what he has there anyway. Naruto shrugged before following her further into the outpost. Later. Upon returning to the tavern where they were currently staying, Naruto was surprised to see two tawny shinobi in the room, talking to Taiya. I already fucking told you, I have no idea which way the fucking shinobi went. She told the tawny jonin. All three of them turned to see Naruto and company enter the room. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt. Naruto said, closing the door and smirking. Taiya growled at his implication and shouted, just come in her, fuckface. The other tawny shinobi gulped. He was a censor, and he felt a massive amount of chakra coming from the blonde. Just kidding. Anyway, we encountered a friend of yours on the way back from the river. Naruto was thrown into the wall as Karen pushed him out of the way and leapt to Taiya. Taicha number SMASH number CRASH number CRUNCH number. I missed you so much. Hey Kurinlam, go already. Taiya said, trying to pry the other reteed off of her. I believe you have some explaining to do. The jonin who had just spoken to Taiya turned to Naruto and Co. Such is why a group of trained shinobi is in our territory without a shinobi's traveling permit. That is because as far as we are concerned, we are no longer shinobi. Neji answered. We have been asked not to divulge any of the information, but one of us has been charged with a crime he didn't commit and was given the choice between 2 years in Hazuki Castle or exile. They watched the jonin and his companion wince at the mention of Hazuki Castle. What was the crime? He asked. Injuring a fellow shinobi during a mission to retrieve said shinobi who had gone rogue. Naruto answered dully. The asshole was the council's favorite and I managed to return him with relatively minor injuries. The bane of any shinobi village. The jonin commented, making a note on his page. What are your names? My name is Menma, no family name that I know of. Naruto answered. My name is Ryu. This is my cousin, Hana. Neji introduced himself and Hinata. We encountered Menma after our village was overrun by bandits and we joined him on his travels. And this troublemaker is Karen. My ex-lover. Taiya growled out, still trying to pry Karen off of her. Naruto, Neji and Hinata and the two shinobi froze, then mechanically turned their heads towards Taiya and a heavily blushing Karen. Why did you tell them about that? She hissed, whilst a drop of blood leaked from her nose. Because it is the truth that we used to be extremely handsy with each other with plenty of clothes on action, and my tits are hurting because you are crushing them right now. Flashback to end. Jiraiya's face turned blank before his nose started bleeding, which earned him a dual haymaker from both Taiya and Karen, with an additional beatdown on the way from Tsunade, all of whom called him a pervert. Naruto chuckled before holding out a hand and Hinata and Neji both handing over a 100 note each. Naruka just looked on with a small smile on her face before turning to Tsunade and asking, can you teach me to punch like that? Sure. Why not? Tsunade asked. Now, what exactly is your relation to Naruto? Flashback 3, Naruka, 2 years after arriving in the West, 1. It's been 2 years since Naruto and Co arrived in the West. In that time, they lived their lives. Karen continued to hone her skills in the medical field, getting her doctor's certificate, 4th order, a year and a half after entering the system, and continues to study under a 1st order doctor. Taiya continued in the musical industry with her flute, though she also received regular treatment for her legs, and a year in took her first steps with the help of crutches. Interestingly enough, Neji intervened on more than one occasion when someone tried to charm Taiya, with Naruto and Hinata opening up a betting pool on the two of them. Hinata began a tutorship under Kurokuma's sister, who basically ran the economy in his realm. Kurokuma may be a good military commander, but he was average when running an economy. And just because she was an economist didn't mean that she was defenseless, which Hinata soon found out during their frequent spars in Naruto whenever he called her Granny number 2. Naruto and Neji were taken under the wings of 2 of Kurokuma's generals, learning the art of war, learning to handle weapons, how to lead troops in battle, and more importantly, learning to earn the respect and loyalty of their people and those who follow them. And whilst Neji proved to be the greater commander, Naruto was the better leader and commanded more respect from his troops than Neji did. Hinata and Naruto advanced their relationship and became engaged shortly before Kurokuma officially launched the Unification War, about a year after they arrived in the West. The reason was that as Hinata and Naruto weren't officially engaged yet, nobles could still force her to be either their mistress or their concubine. Each time, either Kurokuma warned them off or Naruto made a few dozen clones during his duel with said noble and proceeded to beat the shit out of him, or, in one case, her. Hey, there was never a rule stipulated that one couldn't make clones of oneself to help during a duel. This time though, it wasn't a noble underneath Kurikuma's rule who demanded her hand in marriage, but a neighboring warlord to the north, whom Kurikuma had sent an envoy for a one-year-long alliance, so he could focus on the warlord on his southern border. When Naruto heard the news, he was furious enough to vow vengeance, but compassed enough that he straight up proposed to Hinata, who tearfully accepted. It was the happiest day of her life, with the sole downside being that she saw Taya, Karen, Niji, Kurikuma and numerous other people exchange bundles of money, making about half of them smile, whilst the other half grumbled at lost the damn bet again. The warlord declared war, but was given a bloody nose when Naruto and Niji, both of whom were Corps 2 commanders at this point, caught his army in an ambush in a mountain pass and smashed them. They then pursued the warlord to his mountain fortress. Under normal circumstances, that place was supposed to withstand a siege for a year. Naruto and Neji were far from normal circumstances the very first day. Naruto and his clones stormed the walls, opened the gates, and let the combined force of his and Niji's corps take the outer walls. By the end of the week, the fortress had been captured, the warlord having been slain by his own retainer, who assumed command for all about one day before he was captured. It was upon their triumphant return to Kurikuma's capital that Naruto and Niji learned from the spies they sent into the elemental nations that a lab of Orochimaru's had been found. The spies didn't report any further, but Kurikuma authorized for Naruto and Karen to go and investigate. But first, they were to visit the hospital where Taya was getting treatment. There, they witnessed Taya take the first tentative steps, unassisted by crutches, the first she had made in over 2 years. Karen, who worked at the hospital, cried as her best friend took a major leap towards recovery. Hinata leaned against Naruto, the two of them smiling in congratulations. Niji actually clapped his hand and cheered Taya on, before coughing into his hand with a blush on his face. Naruto and Hinata saw this and smiled. The betting pool just got raised by 50 ryo. So, what is this I hear about Blondie and Karen-chan heading back to the inn? Taya asked that evening, as the group and some friends of theirs sat around the fire, cooking dinner. Our spies there have discovered one of Orochimaru's labs, hidden on one of the isles of the Land of Water. Apparently the place is overrun with monsters, but one of the infiltration specialists reported sightings of what appeared to be Western medical technology. Naruto told her. But why send Karen? Taya asked. I also know. We need speed and stealth for this mission. Karen told her. No offense, but stealth was never on your priority list and we can't move very fast with you mostly still confined to a wheelchair or crutches. One of their closest friends from the west, a shield maiden who came from the same tribe as Kurikuma, who was saved by Naruto and Niji during one of the border wars with neighboring warlords a year back. I am a bit lost. Who is Orochimaru? Skull, Orochimaru is the worst criminal imaginable in the elemental nations. Naruto said bluntly. He experimented on humans, which is what led to him becoming a criminal in the first place, but he managed to escape capture, and since then, he has been kidnapping, stealing and experimenting incessantly in his hidden laboratories. Remember the piece of shit Oni I used to be able to turn into until that funky hickey mark on my neck was removed last month? Taya asked. Skull and the other nodded and shuddered. That was a gruesome affair. Whilst Naruto was busy removing it, Taya had gone on a rampage and it took an entire battalion of Naruto and Niji's best to restrain her. That was one of his more successful experiments. Karen and I used to be his subordinates, but for various reasons, we left him and joined Blondie, Squeaky and Shithead. If that was him being successful, then I shudder to think what his failures look like. Another friend, an old knight called Samuel sighed. He was Naruto's chief lieutenant in his corps, but Naruto's habit of not treating his men as subordinates and more like fellow people bought him his friendship. Trust me, you don't want to fucking know. Taya shuddered. Language? Niji said. Fucking bite me. Taya snapped at him. So, when is the ship leaving? The ship is being loaded as we speak. Tomorrow at first light the captain wants to sail from the harbor at first light. We could be gone for a month, depending on the weather. Naruto said. What about us? Hinata asked. Well, someone's got to take care of you, you know, make sure that another stupid fat warlord or noble doesn't try his luck with you. Naruto said, pocking her on the forehead, making her pout. Besides, Skull needs a new hobby. Naruto said, getting a loud hey. From the shield maiden. Maybe you can teach her some knitting. Skull paled when it appeared that Hinata was actually considering it. A week later. Naruto had to admit, the journey back to the end was far more pleasant than the journey to the western lands because the ship he was on A didn't stop at each and every port on the way and B was a lot faster than the slow-ass trading ship he was on. Still didn't help because both he and Karen still got seasick. When they finally arrived at their destination, the local Kiri shinobi could only shake their heads when Naruto and Karen immediately headed off and threw up in the nearest bin they could find. They wrote the pair off as not being a threat because this was just one of the outlying islands after all, and the sight of passengers rushing off the ship and throw up in one of the bins was a fairly common occurrence. Later the two met up with the spies near the laboratory and the two immediately saw why they couldn't get any intel on the interior. The place was swarming with feral demons, or more accurately, those people marked with Orochimaru's cursed seal that had gone berserk. Is there any way to save them? Naruto asked Karen, who shook her head, having sensed the chakras of the transformed humans and found them completely corrupted. I see, he said morosely. After dealing with the berserk curse-sealed people, Naruto, Karen and the spies entered the lab and found the place completely trashed. As Karen was making a comment about how she agreed with the spy who infiltrated the place, she suddenly felt a tingle on her since there was a chakra signature somewhere in the base that was incorporated like the ethers, but it didn't feel as pure as normal chakra felt, like two chakra signatures that had been successfully spliced together. Not only that, but the signatures felt very damn familiar to her. As they continued to search, they came across corpses, most torn to shreds, literally, others crushed. Eventually they came across a room where they saw a growth tanks, all of them broken except for one, which still had equipment connected, the light on the inside of the tank, giving off an eerie green light. What is this? Naruto asked nobody in particular. Karen kneeled down and picked up a notepad, dusting it off before reading it. Not Watwo, she said, eyes furrowing as she continued to read. Project Nuke, dubbed Naruka or just simply Naruka. Oh, Kabuto, you fucking sick son of a bitch. What's the matter? Naruto asked. He had rarely ever heard her swear like that before. She is his project to create a perfect specimen and Uzumaki with all of their best known traits. Longevity, the same healing abilities I have, your self-healing ability, the chakra chains of your mother, you name it. She growled. Was he successful? Naruto asked, trying to keep his anger in check. From the numerous times she had been released from the tank to learn the language, learn how to fight, all that stuff, she has thus far shown all of the above. Karen said. Except for the chakra chains. But she also refuses to listen to anyone. Karen stopped as she saw the girl's genetic origin. Oh, now I really want to kill that asshole. You're sounding a lot like Taiya. Naruto said, trying to ease his anger with a joke. Fucking bite me then. Karen snapped at him. After a while, both of them started laughing. In all seriousness, what is the matter this time? Naruto asked. She handed him the page she just read. Uzumaki specimen number 072, codename. Naruka 0-1-4. Donors. Uzumaki Naruto x Konoha Shinobi, status. Unknown, assumed dead. Uzumaki Karen x Odo Shinobi, status. Traitor, unknown, assumed in hiding. Notes. Scheduled for termination as she does not comply with orders from their superiors. Any forms of restraint were broken by her until tranquilizers are used. However, great steps have been made which we can apply to specimen number 073, Naruka 0-1-5 once she is grown enough for stage 2. Naruto looked at Karen and nodded. Leave some of him for me to kill. Releasing her. Karen said and reached for the release button. As she did, Naruka's eyes snapped open and she looked at Naruto with a glare, which morphed into confusion when she didn't recognize him. Flashback 3 end. Afterwards, she went on a bit of a rampage until we managed to restrain her and calm her enough that we could begin communicating. Naruto said. Karen and some of the doctors have determined that Kabuto never gave her lessons on how to control her emotions, and even now, she is more like an Inuzuka than anything, acting on their emotions rather than their thoughts. Sounds a lot like you, Haim. Jiraiya commented and was immediately sent into the floor by Tsunade. That will be 10,000 bucks for the floor repairs, please. Hinata said, a counting board in her hands. Those wooden boards have been specially imported from the land of spring and cost a small fortune. Tsunade looked at her aghast. 10,000 Ryo for a few square meters of floorboarding. What, want me to remove the 50% discount I gave you? Hinata asked, raising an eyebrow. Off to the side, Naruto, Karen and Naruka were all holding their hands to their mouth because they were that close to laughing. Hinata had adopted a rather nasty trolling streak from her teacher, Kurikuma's late wife, one that worked wonders in the business sector, but hilarious in situations like these. Chapter 4. Tournament Arc, Part 1. 2 weeks after Jiraiya and Tsunade arrived in the west. So, brat? Tsunade asked, what are you planning? The unification war ended nearly a year ago. Naruto said from his position behind his desk with the usual bunch of clones on either side working on paperwork. I was planning on holding a couple of tournaments to celebrate the anniversary of the unification, a 3-part event consisting of a fighting tournament, one where artists compete and are judged by the spectators to avoid the possibility of bias amongst the judges and to give the people a voice, and lastly one where wandering minstrels and songwriters get a chance to have their voices heard. The first one I can understand, the second one I can understand to an extent, but why the third one? Tsunade asked. Believe it or not, but musicians played a large role in Niji's and my core back in the day, helping keep morale high and even composing a few songs that they liked to sing or hum as we marched from battlefield to battlefield. Naruto told her. And morale is a major factor in any battle. Tsunade nodded. On more than a few occasions, morale is what lead us to victory. Naruto agreed. Those fights literally came down to which side broke first, and my core always held out until I defeated the enemy's commander. Once, one of our minstrels, a young former slave girl we named Mouse due to her quiet voice, even got close to the fighting, then started playing her flute. Don't ask me how it happened, but the sound of her music reached everyone and gave them a second wind. Naruto looked at his hands with a somber smile. Unfortunately, she was struck in the heart by a stray arrow, but that battle was pretty much over at that point. Several battalions who partook in that battle had her name etched into their respective memorial boards in remembrance of her actions and as a reminder that the even smallest of voices can be heard and have the greatest of impacts on any event. Tsunade nodded in acceptance. Even now, Naruto showed that he was still unpredictable. And the second tournament is? She asked. To showcase the art from all over the Yggdrasil Empire and her allies. It is to remind the people about the diversity that can be found throughout the empire. We are, after all, not a singular ethnic or cultural group, but numerous communities, all different from one another, and since most people cannot afford to travel abroad to witness the different cultures, I have decided to bring a part of those cultures here, so my people can see for themselves the variety that can be found in the world, then bring them home for those who couldn't travel. Alright, you convinced me. She said, crossing her arms. Naruto nodded as she left him to do his work. Later, council meeting. So are you thinking of inviting some people from Spring Country? Rimuru asked. Naruto nodded. And also some of the other minor nations of the eastern continent, yes. He answered. However, since anyone can apply for the tournament and we will be holding prelims a week before the actual tournament begins, which will be in 3 months from now, I am of no doubt that the people from the 5 major nations will try to dig their greedy fingers into the prize pool. That's a given. Izumi Curtis said as she leaned back in her seat. The independent merchant branch I asked to open in the east reported that of the 5 great nations, only Tsuchi and Mizu are economically and financially independent, so I don't think they will send many people to compete. Hei's no Kuni, thanks to its geography of being predominantly one huge desert, is financially and economically dependent on trade and the income from the missions for the shinobi, although we have started opening channels with them as per your orders some time ago. Apparently, the merchant council in Kei's capital is against the idea of trading with us through the IM and are threatening to blacklist their own shinobi from numerous stores and towns if the deal goes through. When their daimyo learned of this, our merchants reported that he threatened to hang the representative of his own merchant guild. She gave a sigh. Currently the bottleneck for trade between us lies in the Kei's no Kuni's merchant guild and the IM. They're coming to an agreement on prices and stock choices, with the guild still trying to take the cream of the cake for themselves. Amanari no Kuni on the other hand has a reasonably stable economy, however their heavy funding of the military has left them pretty cash-strapped as of late. I believe they will send at least 6 of their jonin to participate once they hear word of this tournament. She continued. Including the Reikage and his younger brother, B. Everyone nodded, knowing full well what this meant. I no Kuni where to even begin. Ever since the old hag was ousted last year, the seat of leadership has passed on to some asshole called Danzo Shimura, and I am saying this here and now, please blacklist anyone from that village from partaking in the tournament. For you to ask that, Izumi-chan, then this man must be a piece of work. Makarov spoke up. More so than some of the lads you are usually beating into shape. Naruto snorted. Piece of work is the major understatement of the decade. I don't know much myself, but he is known as the Dark Shinobi, and he used to lead a highly confidential and controversial Black Ops unit known as Root until Sarutobi Hiruzen ordered the group disbanded. I remember that old man. Sarutobi-san was well respected even at a young age amongst the Uzumaki. I shed a tear when you told us of his passing. Shanks said. I actually met Danzo once when he arrived in Uzushio to negotiate a new trade deal with us, under orders from the 3rd Hokage, he claimed. Turns out, he just wanted us to provide their Anbu with Uzumaki seals, including some of our Kenjutsu, which he shouldn't even have known about since they were sealed away within our own versions of the Scroll of Seals. What kind of Kenjutsu are we talking about? Naruto asked, weary. Ever since he met Shanks and the other surviving Uzumaki, he'd been taking lessons in sealing from some of them and thus knew firsthand just how powerful their seals could be in first-hand experience memories from unfortunate clones. He still wondered why the hell there exists a seal that makes people's hair look and feel like the quills of a porcupine, or something that Hinata found out the hard way during her first and only unannounced visit during one of Naruto's few ninjutsu lessons under Shanks. Loyalty seals, seals that force the bearer to answer any question whilst being placed in a subconscious state, and time-death seals that are impossible to detect, are just the ones I know about, since I only know about them because of my former position as a scribe in the Uzushio Council. He answered. There are rumors that he also asked for access to our library, but that was thankfully turned down. Did they get any of those? Hinata asked. She shuddered, remembering what loyalty seals could do. As far as I know, the only ones we were willing to hand over were loyalty seals, though we gave him a far inferior version, since it takes a Grand Sealmaster to apply the complete seal at the base of the tongue. The inferior seal only paralyzes the bearer should they betray the one they are loyal to, not seal away any and all knowledge of their home, and fry any and all means of speaking vocally again. Shank said, looking grim. 6 weeks later we sent our second princess, your mother, to Konoha to be the next host of the Kyuubi. Within a decade, Uzushio fell in the Third War. None of our pleas for help to Konoha were answered. Do you believe that Danzo may have had a hand in that then? Rimuru asked, hands clasped just underneath his chin and a contemplative frown on his face. Like everyone else on the council, the more he heard about Danzo, the less he thought of him. I wouldn't put it past him. Shank said. Even back then, he looked at the tree instead of the forest. His sole focus was just to make Konoha great, even if it meant committing genocide on any and all nations and people around them, ally or enemy alike. And just a week before Uzushio was attacked, we caught some of his rude Anbu trying to break into one of our libraries, and we found the very loyalty seal we gave Danzo on his tongue. From him we managed to learn how many other rude Anbu were in Uzushio, and we killed them before they could act out their own missions. Naruto sighed. Regardless, I have already agreed to make it so that anyone can enter. He looked up. However, I have not said anything about people bearing any of these seals, or seals in general, from not being monitored during their stay here in the West. Master Makarov, Rimuru team. He looked at the two people mentioned. Can I entrust the two of you with discovering which people bear seals of any kind and have them put under watch? Already found one. Rimuru sassed only for Naruto. Snappa, not me, you fool. At him, causing the two of them to enter a verbal conflict, whilst the rest of the council drank some of Iroh's tea and snacked on popcorn they brought along for occasions such as this. None of them ever regretted becoming part of this council because it was just so entertaining watching the two friends bicker. Q, we are not friends. From two bickering friends. Time skip. The messengers to the minor villages were greeted differently, depending on the village, but all left with friendliness more or less. Most of these small villages were relatively friendly to their respective envoys, with some of the more hardline villages such as Omegakure, Takigakure and the Nadeshiko village, giving the envoys a hard greeting, bordering on hostile. However, upon hearing the message that the messengers bore, only Omegakure maintained their hardline attitude, though they became far less hostile. The Kigakure actually did a near 180 and offered the messengers many gifts if they would bring their requests for trade to the emperor and signed up for all 3 tournaments. A male member of the envoy group to Nadeshiko actually had to clearly state that he was a married man and an expecting father when some of the Kunoichi there requested to duel him for his hand in marriage, simply because they heard that he is a veteran of the recently ended civil war and thus would bear them strong children. His companion, who happened to be his sister, giggled and told him, "Welcome to my world, bro. Now you know how I feel with all those fanboys." Anyway, Nadeshiko signed up for the first and third tournaments, though their leader, Shizuka, requested a meeting with the EMPRORAN. And we all can't see where this is going. No one to the major villages. The Wagakure, as expected, agreed to participate in all 3 tournaments, though they only sent 3 representatives for each, not counting the group that would come as spectators or people wanting to gain knowledge on other villages, and the EMPIRE the other villages also sent a group such as this, so they won't be mentioned below. In total, their group would end up consisting of some 20 individuals. Including contestants. Izu also agreed to all 3 tournaments, however quite a number of people signed up. Their group consisted of around 30 signees, which was lowered down to 10 in the end, with another 23 spectators, including their cage. Tsunade didn't sign up for the music tournament, but a troupe of marionette-wielding shinobi signed up for the arts tournament, whilst about a dozen signed up for the fighting competition, the Kazukiage, Gaara, and his siblings included. In total, this group numbered 32, including participants. Kumo signed up a large number of their shinobi for the first competition, intending to win the prize money for Kumon as expected by the Yggdrasil Council. B and A both signed up. They openly admitted that Kumo stood no chance in the other tournaments. Their group numbered around 50 people, 30 of which were people who signed up to fight in the tournament, 5 were the Reikage's guards, and the rest were observers whose orders were to spot anything that could help strengthen Kumogakure. And lastly, Konoha. The envoys, Benmaru and Albus, threatened to flatten their defensive wall and large parts of Konoha with extreme firepower and lightning should Danzo try to use his hidden Sharingan on them again or threaten them with anything again. In the end, Danzo agreed to send some people to participate in the first and third tournaments, if only to spy on the Western fighters and the participants of the other villages. Though he was internally swearing to kill these two envoys who threatened to cause damage to his great Konoha he had built. As they left Konoha territory heading to one of the IM's ports, the two envoys turned and massacred the root shinobi who had been following them since they left Konoha, with exception to the ones they felt were only loyal to Danzo due to the cursed seal. Those shinobi they captured and brought with them to the west, where one of their Uzumaki seal masters would work to remove those seals with minimal effect on their person. Meanwhile, in Spring Country, Naruto himself was giving the message to Koyuki and her court. The Yggdrasil Empire really likes to spoil us, don't they? Koyuki chuckled, which was mirrored by her council as they knew exactly what she was talking about. In the last year, their country has flourished thanks to their trade agreements with the Yggdrasil Empire. Whilst I can't speak for the shinobi in Yukigakure, I am willing to send some people for the music and the arts tournaments. She winked at her Minister of Arts and Culture, who chuckled. After all, Spring Country's artists and musicians are the most sought after in all of the eastern continent. And you still have a flair for dramatics, little breeze princess. Naruto sassed. Don't you go all sass on your elders, Naruto. Koyuki snapped at him. Whilst her reputation had caused a gale within the elemental nations, Naruto's reputation as the emperor had caused storms and he still didn't let her live it down. Elders? Where? Naruto said, dramatically looking around the room as though looking for elders. The samurai guards chuckled quietly at the sight. Whenever Naruto or Hinata came over to visit, they would always end up throwing sass after sass at each other like a pair of siblings would. Afterwards, Naruto and Koyuki discussed some further trade agreements, as well as the possibilities for a cultural exchange program between the elves, Tempest and Yggdrasil, and Spring Country for after the tournament. Turns out that Spring has some nice tea that is well liked amongst Yggdrasil's allies. Time skip. After Naruto returned to the west, he immediately got down to business by starting his morning the same way as always, having Hinata use her magic in the kitchen after sending a generous amount of clones to start with the paperwork. Say, Hinata, what would you say to partaking in the tournaments? Naruto asked. I wouldn't mind partaking in the music one. Might break out my old harp. Haven't played it in a few weeks now. She answered. Unfortunately, you know that my status would cause some bias amongst the population. That is true. How about giving the opening for that tournament? Naruto asked. Tell you what. You participate in the fighting tournament, I'll do the introduction performance for the third tournament. She said with a smile. And maybe I'll make some of that special ramen for you. She purred. Deal. Naruto said, leaning in to give her a kiss when he winced. Something wrong? Hinata asked, seeing the wince. The me clones just read the roster for the first tournament. Naruto said. Half of Konoha must have put in their Namav in the rest of the Konoha 11 as well as other people. Hinata quirked an eyebrow. That doesn't sound so bad. Might be good to see Kiba and Shino again. Naruto sighed. I'll show you the list later. By the way, why did one of your clones disperse? Hinata asked. He made a comment about the two of us and another clone hit him with a letter opener. Naruto said, then groaned as more memories appeared in his head. And now all of them are embroiled in a brawl. Are they idiots? But aren't they the same as you? Hinata asked jokingly. Since when were you into calling yourself an idiot? Don't you start with that again, Naruto growled. Or else what? Hinata asked with a cute smirk and a finger on her lower lip. Or else. Naruto's face suddenly got a grin that sent a cold chill up her spine. I'll tickle you until you apologize. Hinata did not last long until she started laughing so hard she couldn't speak. She didn't realize that Naruto had a feather laced with itching powder hidden nearby. Time skip 3 days before the tournament's preliminary rounds begin. As the first of the ships carrying the people from the elemental nations arrived at the harbor of the small town, most of the visitors were openly criticizing the buildings. I thought that the empire was supposed to be great. Kiba said, looking around, seeing the repairs all over the place. This place looks worse than Konoha did after Orochimaru's invasion 7 years ago. Kiba, watch what you're saying. Ino snapped at him, slapping him over the head. Better listen to Blondie, mate. They and the rest of the Konoha group turned towards the speaker. They saw a tall red-headed man approach them, the 3 scars crossing his right eye, giving him a don't mess with me appearance. He was wearing a white shirt which was only buttoned up halfway and a black long coat. He wore worn brown pants that appeared to have been heavily patched and sandals. Strapped to his waist was a saber, with his hand resting on its hilt. Otherwise you can dock right next to the groups from Iwa and Kumo, both of whom are being led by their respective cages. His face then turned less stern. The truth however is that whilst the emperor is setting aside quite a bit of the annual budget to repairs, the empire is just so large that many places have yet to start with the repairs, even after a year had passed. "And who are you?" Kaharu asked, keeping a neutral tone however her face showed that she saw him as beneath her. "Your guide," the man said. "But you can call me Akagami Shanks. One of the Yggdrasil's 2 naval commanders serving the emperor directly." "HN. Still not as high a position as an elite," Sasuke said arrogantly. "An elite? Where? I don't see one." Shanks made a show of looking around, which infuriated Sasuke. "Right here, you peasant," he roared. "I am also the clan head of the all-powerful Uchiha clan. When I look at you, all I see is an orphan boy who has no right to that title, as the real clan heir, your brother, is still alive," Shanks said, narrowing his eyes and releasing some of his haki at the group, making many of them take a step back in shock or fall to their knees in fear. "Now, with this minor inconvenience out of the way, shall we head over to the carriages and head over to the imperial capital, and get you quartered in? I am sure that you'd like to rest before being given a tour of the city." Several seasick groans were all the answers he needed. As he turned to leave, one of the rude Anbu that served as Danzo's guards tried to sneak away unnoticed. He did manage to sneak away, but was unaware that he himself was being shadowed by a member of the Assassin Brotherhood. But the group from Suna. Ara was one of the unfortunate people who suffered from seasickness, so he barely saw Legolas approach them. "Welcome to the Yggdrasil Empire, Lord Kazakiaj and delegates from Wind Country." The elf prince greeted them formally. "My name is Legolas Greenleaf too. I will be your guide for the duration of your stay." Ara, forcing his seasickness aside, returned the greeting and introduced everyone in his delegation. "Your reputation precedes you, Lord Kazakiaj. It is rare that a man with a dark past such as yours rises to lead with respect and loyalty, as you do," Legolas said with a smile. "But Iwa and Kumo." Iwa and Kumo landed on the same port and were greeted by 2 elderly people, a giant man who wielded a large naginata and wearing a white coat, and an old man with a gentle visage who was holding a teapot in one hand whilst warming it up using a flame originating from his hand. "Greetings, delegations from Iwa and Kumo." The latter greeted the group. "Welcome to the Yggdrasil Empire. My name is Iroh, next to me is Admiral Edward Whitebeard Newgate. We will be your guides for the duration of your stay." Tsuchikage, Anoki, strained his back trying to get a look of Whitebeard's face, making him fall to his knees in pain. As Ai and Kuritsuchi introduced everyone, Whitebeard leaned down and plucked Anoki from the ground before setting him down on his shoulder. "Old men should see eye to eye, shouldn't they?" he merely said. Anoki said nothing, 1 because his pride wouldn't allow him to agree, 2 because his back still hurt and 3 because he was actually enjoying the view he had from his perch. Many Iwa shinobi grumbled about lucky grouchy old bastards, but otherwise kept their jealousy under check. Kumo meanwhile was already being led away by Iroh towards their carriages that would take them first to their hotel, where they would be staying, and then onwards for a tour of the city. With Kiri and the smaller villages. The delegation from Kiri were met by Master Makarov. Alongside him was his grandson, Laxus, who was a bit late as he was evading his fan club. "Fourth Mizukage, Mei Terumi, I presume?" Makarov spoke up. Mei nodded. "That's me. And you are?" Makarov Dreher, current head of the Mages Association of Yggdrasil, guildmaster of the Fairy Tale Guild, and holder of a dozen other titles that none of you would understand. Makarov answered. Suddenly a bolt of lightning struck the ground next to Makarov, making the shinobi tense and ready themselves for battle. "Relax everyone," Makarov told them with a sigh. "This man is my grandson, Laxus Dreher. This is just his method of evading his fan club." The horror of anybody wonder how Naho the Emperor managed to keep his fan club at bay. Laxus grumbled. "Maybe you should just ask Mira-chan for help with that," Makarov answered. "Because the Emperor has her to keep the fangirls at bay. She will kill me if I ask her," Laxus muttered. What are you talking about?" Chijiro asked, voice filled with uncertainty. "Oh, just the joys horrors of fangirls." Makarov and Laxus answered together before glaring at each other. "Anyway, we will be your guides during your stay in Yggdrasil. We hope that you will enjoy your stay," Laxus told them. "And for God's sake, please don't get any ideas. I am not available." He directed the last part at Mei, whom he smelled some certain pheromones from. "He means that he already has someone he fancies," Makarov said with a smirk. "But Nadeshiko." Shizuka and her group from Nadeshiko encountered Naruka, who bluntly greeted them with these words. "Greetings, Amazon Brigade from the East. I am Uzumaki Naruka and I will be your guide. Yes, I am a woman and yes, I have been chosen so that none of you get any moronic ideas, such as challenging each and every strong young man you see to a stupid duel for their hand in marriage. Just so we are clear, that shit is not allowed in the tournament, so win or lose, you ain't getting fucked here." So, any questions other than what the hell I am talking about? Boy, there were many of thousand of them about what the hell she was talking about. When would it be possible to make an appointment to meet the emperor? Shizuka asked. Naruka looked at her for a moment, then sighed. I will see what I can do. Ani-san will be very busy with the tournaments and all that. Ani-san? Some of the Nadeshiko Kunoichi asked. He saved my life several years ago, and I kinda adopted him as my older brother. Naruka answered with a shrug, omitting a huge chunk of the truth there, but they were better off not knowing anyway. You will understand better once you actually have met him. But the contingent from Spring Country. Koyuki stepped into the carriage assigned to her and came face to face with two old friends. I trust your journey here hasn't been too stressful on you, Koyuki. Oh, you know, the usual, me enjoying the sea breezes whilst my guards all were confined to their cabins with seasickness. She answered with a smile. I hope that you two still remember our deal, so I'd like an update on that. The two others in the carriage gave an awkward laugh whilst blushing a bit. Yeah, about that. Koyuki sighed. Naruto Hinata, you two are the rulers of the empire. People will be expecting you two to produce an heir soon and I can't wait to be a godparent, so get on with it already. But the other smaller shinobi villages. All of the smaller shinobi villages were met with high-ranking individuals, though the AIM group, consisting of the Akatsuki and a small group of AIM Jonin, got Izumi Curtis, who grapples Haiden into submission when he attacked her after she insulted his intelligence. Finally, a civilian of all people managed to shut him up. Pay up. Kakuzu said, holding out a hand for the cash that Kisame and Dodara, who both grumbled, handed over. 10 days later. The stadium shook with the roars as people cheered. My people, nearly a year ago, we ended centuries of strife. Naruto said. Let these next few days be dedicated to those who made it possible. Another round of cheers greeted his words. Therefore, I proclaim the beginning of the first tournament. The entire city shook with the cheers this time. What if Naruto fights back against the council harem naruhina? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.